that's the way a lot of us live. There's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot of good stuff to find in the world. And yet we'll zero in on the one thing that's just not perfect. And it's just like we feel like we have a right to expect perfection. We feel like we have a right for things to be exactly as we want them. And in your dreams, you can have your eggs the way that you want them, but you can't eat them. And in real life, you can't have your eggs exactly as you want them, but you can eat them. So I guess the question is, which one would you rather have? The reality that's as good as it can get, or the idea of perfection, which you're never going to be able to address or attain? How far do we go in separating the art from the artist?
I wouldn't necessarily say it really isn't how far it goes. It really is more just a case of you have to separate art from artist. One of my favorite artists is a book like H.P. Lovecraft. I loved his books.
Oh yeah, a little problematic, sure.
Yeah, horrible guy though, super racist, wouldn't like him. But that's where I personally, I have my own bias in it because I'm obsessed with things like literature. So I have my own bias in that. But at the same time, I still understand why other people wouldn't like him. You know, I get it. I kind of have to. But that's why I like kind of put my example of separating art from artists.
And wouldn't that maybe be the best revenge, by the way? Be able to tell the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft, I'm a huge fan. No, I learned it in an integrated school. Watch this ghost squirm. This is one of those reasons you should be careful about putting your faith into celebrities or especially into artists. Artists do crazy shit. When you look at what Kanye West is doing, and he's doing all of what he's doing, I look at him and go, can't wait for the new record. Because whatever's happening right now is what's going to be building into that record. It's not going, he doesn't write a record by sitting in his bathtub in a bubble bath. You, as an artist, if any of you guys are artists, you understand this. You have to go out, you have to encounter the world, you have to do stuff, and then you come back and you tell everybody about it. That's why I say that if any of you ever date a poet, run. You should get as far as girls, get as far away from the poet as you can. And if he's a poet and a musician, forget about it. Run twice as fast. And the same goes in reverse too. I mentioned that one time, and one of my students, I still talk to her, she said, after class she said, you're right, but it works both ways. I said, I know, because she was a poet. And I see how she has lived. 17 and back this way. So yeah, it's an interesting question, what it is that you're going to be remembered for, because you don't get to choose. Like she's pointing out, it's humiliating. It's like, oh my God, of everything I did, all that you remember is my hairstyle. But then it's also humbling because now you start to, it's humbling in a couple ways. First off, it's humbling because it kind of puts you in your place, but also, like what you do in your life that's valuable to others, a lot of times is going to be a complete mystery to you. So, for example, there was one of my former students. He's an artist. He's a musician. He's kind of well known locally, and he was doing he sent me a link to an interview he was doing on a podcast. And in the interview, the guy had asked him about influences or whatever, and he mentions me, and he said that one time in class, I said to the class, "I'm a different person right now than I was when I started this sentence. I'm a different person now than I was when I started this sentence, because even though it's only been a second and a half or 2 seconds to complete that sentence, I've taken in some things about the world, my mind has changed, my body has changed." The point is that it goes back to this idea that you're changing every single second of life. And I remember having said that because it's something I do say, but I don't remember having said it in that class at that time to this one person. How is it that that one person took one sentence and then kind of built a lot of their music, not around it, but you get the idea, it influenced them in some way. You'd have no idea the influence that you can have on people. Some of you may have been on a trolley, 2 weeks ago, and maybe some stranger just saw you, and the way that you walked out of the trolley ever, you have no idea, but something about that sparked something in this person's mind that's going to be a hit song in 2 years, and you have no idea that happened. Or maybe you said something to a person, and it completely changed the trajectory of their life. I just saw something that somebody had sent me about, I don't remember exactly, I should remember what it was because it was a big deal, but it was like a guy gave a homeless person something, and then he walked away. He wasn't thinking much of it. And then the next day, the homeless person met him because he was going to work. Whatever, gave him a note. And the note essentially said, "I was on my way to kill myself yesterday, but essentially you showed me this one act of kindness, and now I'm thinking like maybe I can turn my life around." Blah blah blah. I don't know if the person turned their life around or not, but it wouldn't have even started if that person hadn't just done this one kind of act of kindness. So you never can tell the influence that it's going to have. Sway and then Franklin.
So,
How about yourself? Like if you were to be, what would you want to be remembered for? If you were to die right now. I'm not saying you're going to, but you've got 10 seconds to decide.
being in this class.
Being in the I was a student of scandals. Yes, that's. Yeah, so you gotta be careful, man, because what you're gonna be remembered for. And the things, like I said, you don't even get to decide what you're remembered for. I think I've asked you guys before about the joke. What's better than winning a gold medal at the Special Olympics? Never asked you that? Okay. Hey guys, what's better than winning a gold medal at the Special Olympics? Ice cream! Now, if you understand that joke, I know there'll be people who will hear that and be like, "You're making fun of people with special needs." No, I'm not. You're missing the point of that joke. If you think it's about making fun of people, you're missing the point of the joke. It's dark humor, yeah, and I get it. Dark humor is like, it's like food. Not everybody gets it. But it always has a really serious truth behind it. It tells a really important and true story. There's something else going on there. That's like the medium that you use to get to the truth about something. But anyway, I mentioned that because I told that joke to a class a long time ago, probably, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years ago now. And I remember that I was driving home one day and I was going down Mile of Cars Way, over by where New York Division is, through that freeway entrance over there. And I got to a stop sign right in front of the Shell station, and I heard someone yelling, "Ice cream! Ice cream!" And I looked over and there was one of my former students in the car next to me. And it had been a couple of years since I had this person. And I was like, what the hell, you know? And it's happened to me more than once, multiple times. I mean, seriously, multiple times. I've been at the Walmart down the street here on Highland, and I'll be looking for, whatever I'm looking for, and I'll hear someone at the end of the aisle, "Ice cream! Ice cream!" I'll look and I'm like, what the. Seriously? It's like, "Hey, what's up, Gallon?" Dude, there's almost 500 videos online. I have talked a lot. I have said a lot. Life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer, but you can find something that transcends the suffering, make it all worthwhile. You don't know what you don't know. A whole bunch of stuff I've said. I'm remembered for ice cream. I was thinking, like, if I were to die today, and if there was a funeral, and if people attended, I wonder how many of those students from way back then would stand around and just be like, "Ice cream. Ice cream, ice cream," and then people are like, "Oh, who's that kind of a teacher?" I don't know, but there's something humbling about that, because it was back then, as it is now. If you ever want to hear a joke from me, if you're walking down the hallway at some point, you just poke your head in my room and go, "Scan, let me get a joke." I'll give you a dark humor joke. I'll tell you a joke. No matter what I'm doing, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll tell you a joke. And I think, like, why is that the one that got remembered back then? I have no idea, man. And you don't get to choose what you're remembered for. But maybe I can look at it and say, that was one thing that made them laugh. And maybe once in a while now, when they come across, like, I don't know, like they go to Baskin Robbins, maybe still they go, "Ice cream." In other words, it's something silly that still makes them laugh years later. And that's a positive thing. That's a good thing then. Maybe that's better than making you think deeply about something. Maybe it's better to make you laugh about something deep. And so, I guess do the best you can to be remembered for something good, but just understand that you can't control what it is that you're going to be remembered for. Heck, you can't even really control if you're going to be remembered, especially today. Others? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?
So like international dark humor is basically just like, obviously a joke, but with a message.
Should have one, yeah. Yeah, because it's stuff that we would laugh at that we wouldn't normally laugh at. but it but it should have a message behind it. In other words, it shouldn't just be offensive. Stuff can be funny and offensive, but it's not really funny just because it's offensive. And I know there are some people who will think stuff is funny just because it's offensive, but again, if that's you, I guess consider it. What you're essentially laughing at is that you have the ability to make the world worse for some people by making them, by laughing at them and making them feel in the blank, horrible about themselves or whatever. That's pretty easy to do, but to be able to tell a joke, and it can be funny and offensive, and again, you can't control something like that, but it should absolutely tell the truth, as all comedy should. I mean, comedy, if a person comes in and tells you a story that's based on absolutely nothing and is using words that you don't recognize, is talking about locations you've never heard of, it probably won't be funny. That's one thing that Chaperone did say that there's something relatable. You have to be able to relate to it. And then it becomes, and when you relate to it, that means it's true, at least true to you. And then if it's true, that means it has some sort of a root in reality, and then it gives you an ability to laugh at reality. Because, what's the alternative? Is there anything to cry about in reality? Yeah. Look around the world. It's easy to cry about stuff. There's a lot to cry about, but we miss the fact that there's so much to laugh about also. There's so much beauty in the world, and we miss it because there's this old story I heard about a woman who's sitting on a beach and she's holding her baby, and all of a sudden the sky darkens, a big wave comes over, crashes over her, and she sits up and her baby's gone. And then she starts screaming at the sky, she's screaming at God, how terrible are you? You would take my child from me. And all of a sudden the wave goes, hits her again, the baby's back in her arms. And she yells at the sky, he had a hat. That's the way a lot of us live. There's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot of good stuff to find in the world. And yet we'll zero in on the one thing that's just not perfect. And it's just like we feel like we have a right to expect perfection. We feel like we have a right for things to be exactly as we want them. And in your dreams, you can have your eggs the way that you want them, but you can't eat them. And in real life, you can't have your eggs exactly as you want them, but you can eat them. So I guess the question is, which one would you rather have? The reality that's as good as it can get, or the idea of perfection which you're never going to be able to address or attain? And the thing is that a lot of people do sit with the idea of, I want the perfection I'll never attain. And those people are generally miserable. I know a lot of those people. There's a word that I actually typically find associated with those people. And I'm not saying that all activists are miserable, but I know a lot of them who are. And that's why they become an activist. It's a chicken or the egg thing, I suppose. Which one came first, their misery or their activism, and then into their misery. But I mean, I have found that miserable people become that. Why? Because they're unhappy with the state of the world. It makes sense. If you're unhappy with the state of the world, you become an activist. And again, that doesn't mean that just because you become an activist, you're a miserable person. Because sometimes there are miserable circumstances that have to be overcome. Like if I don't want to go too deeply into it, but if you go look up, I was saying earlier about Nelson Mandela, find out what was going on in South Africa at the time. Why is it that he felt the need to blow up rail lines and kill people? He's got a reason for it. You may not like the reason, or maybe you will like the reason. Angela Davis was doing a lot, and if you go back and look at what it is that she was going through, you agree with it or disagree with it, but you can't say she didn't have reasons for it, strong reasons for it, even if you disagreed with them.
She had a great conviction as well.
She had great convictions. Yeah, she still does. I like that face, by the way. She's like, really? My hairdo? Others? All right, happy Tuesday.